A bit over a year ago, I published a video about things that smart cruise passengers always do on their cruise, and it turned out to be a massive hit with nearly 1 million views. Now, I'm back with a dozen more things that smart cruise passengers do for their trip, and these might even be better than the original list. Trust me, they are all things that you'll want to know for your next cruise, so let's dive in. Everyone knows that airfare can rise and fall in price, but did you know that your cruise fare can as well? The good news is that the swings in price aren't as common or dramatic as you see with the airlines, but it can happen and the price difference can end up being a decent chunk of change. That's why smart cruise passengers, they don't just buy their cruise and forget it, they check back occasionally, maybe once a month say, to see if there has been a price drop. If there is one, then you want to contact the cruise line and ask about the difference. Your success in getting the money back can depend on the type of fare that you purchase, but I've personally been refunded price differences as onboard credit, and all it took was a short phone call to the cruise line to explain the situation. Maybe someone can help me out in the comments, but why are there always such long lines at guest services at the start of the cruise? To this day, I just cannot figure that out. Now, going to talk to guest services, yeah, sure. There's usually one thing or another that you'll occasionally need to speak with them about. But smart passengers know that the desk is open literally around the clock. You can go at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon. And seemingly every trip, there's a long line that first afternoon and evening, and by the next morning, hardly anyone is there. That's why it's much smarter to wait a bit if you need to talk to guest services. Go enjoy your vacation instead of spending time in line, just come back later. Smart cruise passengers know to match the type of cabin that they purchase with the cruise that they are taking. Take an example of a 3-day cruise from Miami. It's short, it's going to have a party atmosphere, and you're going to be spending a lot of time outside of the room on the pool deck or in port. In that case, what is the point of paying extra for a balcony cabin? If you want to and you have the money, sure, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Compare that with a 7-day cruise to Alaska. Here, there's constantly scenery to see no matter if you are in port or not. You're also going to be on the ship a lot more with more downtime. In that case, being in an interior cabin instead of something with a view doesn't make much sense either. That's why you want to consider the sort of cruise that you're taking when thinking about the cabin that you buy. The two, they simply go hand in hand. Why on earth would you bring a shoe organizer, wet wipes, or a nightlight on a cruise? If you've taken a few cruises, then you likely know why. These items and plenty more can come in very handy on a cruise. Take the shoe organizer. There's nothing better for keeping all the small things that you bring, like sunscreen, glasses, chargers, and more, all organized and not cluttering up a small cabin. Wet wipes? Trust me, the scratchy one-ply toilet paper provided on a cruise just doesn't cut it. And that nightlight is helpful if you're in a very dark interior cabin with no natural light. For a full list of things to pack that you may not think about, look at the link in the description of this video. There's a lot of funny things that you can bring that are worth their weight in gold. Now, no one will fault you for wanting to get to the port first thing. After all, who doesn't want to get their vacation started? But unless you have special status that gives priority boarding, it's a smarter idea to wait until later in the day to board. What you'll often find is that showing up to the terminal right at boarding finds a place that's busy and hectic. You're fighting through traffic, you're fighting through people, you're standing in long lines to get checked in. Instead, if you wait until later in the boarding window, things are much calmer and can even be almost empty. One other perk, boarding early can mean your cabin isn't ready yet, so you've got to walk around the ship with your carry-on luggage. Board later, and you can go immediately to your room and drop off your things before you go out and explore and start your vacation. Years ago, the cruise ship was always considered the way of getting you from port to where you then could go explore. Over the decades, however, things have definitely changed, And smart cruise passengers realize that while you may go to exotic ports for many trips, especially around the Caribbean, the ship is the actual destination. After all, cruise ships have transformed to offer everything from Broadway shows to roller coasters on board, and there can be dramatic differences between new ships and old. That means you should place emphasis on finding the right cruise ship for you. If you like peace and quiet and a lot of calm, then those older ships, they will help you have a better vacation. The vibe is much more subdued. If you want non-stop things to do, then you want the newer, larger ships that have the latest and greatest, but they can also feel much busier. No matter what you prefer, it's smart to think about what you want before you actually book that cruise. I mentioned before about showing up later to board faster. That actually ties into something that's a bigger trend that clever passengers do, in that they go against the grain of what the larger crowds will do on the cruise ship. Let's face it, there are a lot of people on a modern ship, and that can cause some headaches, whether it be having to wait to be seated, to being in a crowded port, or even finding a chair around the pool. That's where going against the grain is a smart idea. Instead of eating at 7 p.m., eating earlier in the evening or later often means smaller crowds. Instead of trying to be the first off the ship when it docks, waiting for a little bit can make getting off the ship much easier. And instead of heading to the main pool deck during an afternoon at sea, going to a spot forward or aft can usually mean less crowds, making it easier to find a chair and relax. Going against the grain, it does take a little bit of work, but it can make the difference between a good trip and a great trip. Smart cruise passengers, or maybe just those that have sailed multiple cruise lines, they know that each line does have its own personality. So yes, there are definite differences between cruise lines. But apart from the luxury lines versus the mass market cruise lines that cater to everyone, experienced cruisers know that about 80% of the experience is largely the same. Between the pool, days at sea, the cabins, and the service, there's a lot that is actually very similar no matter which cruise line you sail. That's important because if you're the type that is looking for deals, then being flexible with cruise lines is one of the best ways to save. I'm not saying you can't have some lines that you absolutely won't sail or some that are your favorite, but keeping your options open is smart given the similar experiences. Over the years, there's been a big change in how cruises are sold. It used to be that you have the cruise fare, but then you were hit with extra charges for drink packages, Wi-Fi, gratuities, and specialty restaurants, and so much more. Now, many are offering bundles or more all-inclusive offers that are proving popular. With this, you pay more, but you also get a number of items like drink packages and Wi-Fi included in the fare. What many people have discovered is that these can be great deals if you plan to buy the extras anyway. Yes, the overall cruise will cost more, but it's usually sold for less than if you book the base fare and then added on the extras. Smart passengers know not to automatically dismiss these deals. If you watch Cruzely's videos about casino gaming on cruise ships, then you're already keen to what I'm going to share. If not, smart cruise passengers know that all those different games offered in a cruise casino may not be what they appear at first glance. Head to a cruise casino and you'll see stuff that you don't see anywhere else. I'm talking about the crane game with cash prizes, coin pusher games, and the games like Keymaster where you have to line up a key with a hole to win money. But while these games may look like they are all skill, there is still luck involved. For instance, that crane game. It's not just putting the crane in the right position to pick up the money, but the crane itself is set to only offer enough force to pick up the cash occasionally. So even if you're perfectly on the right spot, it may not mean that you win. Remember, it is a casino, so the odds are always in the house's favor. Now, typical people don't pay attention to cruising every single day, but those that do know that the inflation we've all seen on land has made its way to sea as well. And seemingly once a week you hear about one cruise line or the other raising a price anywhere from gratuity charges to drink packages to internet fees on board. That's why if you're a smart cruiser, you make sure that as soon as you know you're going to book some sort of package, you go ahead and do it. I've mentioned in other videos that there are almost always discounts for booking a package early, but you also lock in a cost in case there is a price increase between now and when you actually set sail. It's the same thing with prepaying gratuities. If you've prepaid them and the cost of the daily gratuity goes up, you'll be grandfathered in at the lower rate. One of the smartest things you can do? Take advantage of what the cruise line allows for drinks. Now, you can't bring beer or liquor on board, but most do allow you to bring on a bottle of wine or champagne per adult in the cabin. Others allow you to bring on non-alcoholic drinks like soda or juices or teas. This is a place where you definitely want to take advantage. On a cruise ship, a soda is about $3 a pop. That means bringing on a 12-pack is roughly $40 worth. A glass of wine can be $8 to $12, meaning that bottle you can bring is worth even more money. And all that is on top of being able to bring brands on board that you like. For example, Carnival is a Pepsi-only cruise line, meaning Coca-Cola drinkers are out of luck. Now, before you go, I'm interested in what you think is always smart to do on a cruise to have a better trip. So many cruisers will see this, that sharing what you know with them is super helpful. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. And for more tips and info on cruising, be sure to visit Cruzely.com. Until next time, happy sailing.